it's more than a little bit risky right now to even say something that suggests a whiff of an overdose of 1971, because you've been reading, watching, listening to this for the past many days. 50th anniversary is over. So we are not talking about 1971, the war or the history or what happened. We love politics. So we are talking about politics. And we love politics even more than we might love military history or cricket, because behind everything lies politics in a democracy. Now, there was a lot of discussion on the soldiers, on the general, on the field marshal, 1971, and another controversy picked up on the anniversary day, 50th anniversary day, when the Congress started saying, and with good reason, that the BJP government in all their promotional stuff on the 50th anniversary had kept Indira Gandhi out. In fact, all the promotional literature, etc., releases, they had very consciously kept Indira Gandhi out. She was the Prime Minister in 1971, that we all know. Now, Congress complained about this, but immediately questions also rose that how much did Congress do about it? Now, Congress has its chief ministers in many states. It has Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Punjab. It also has governments in partnership in other states, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, for example. What stopped any of Congress's chief ministers or Congress's coalition chief ministers to also join in and promote Mrs. Gandhi's role in 1971 or remind people of Mrs. Gandhi's role in 1971? They did not do it. Most of them did not do it because we forget politics. And those who forget politics in a democracy, they pay a very nasty price. Now, it's one thing to say, also in popular imagination, in popular imagery, in our oral history, our memory, we remember people in uniform. We remember generals, we remember soldiers who got decorated, war heroes. But we forget that in a democracy, particularly in a democracy, actually in any country, but particularly in a democracy, the politicians matter. In other, politicians matter even in terms of scripting your country's military history or military successes or failures. Let me put it in a very simple way. In a very simple way, a democracy wins a war when you have a great general, all right, but also when you have a great defense minister. If you do not have a great defense minister, you cannot win a war in spite of the generals and marvelous soldiers. 1962, India had a lousy defense minister who was distracted doing all kinds of things. V.K. Krishna Menon, and India lost a war. And how badly in 1962 to the Chinese. Within 2 weeks of his leaving, another man came into the job, that is YB Chavan, Yashwantrao Balwantrao Chavan, who was then the Chief Minister of Maharashtra only for 2 years, the newly created state of Maharashtra. State was created on May 1, 1960, when the old Bombay state split into Gujarat and Maharashtra on linguistic basis. So he was called from Maharashtra to Delhi because Jawaharlal Nehru needed a strong defense minister. And he came in and he made a big difference. He took over in mid-November 1962. By 1964, he had launched India's first defense 5-year plan. And he had started a massive process of expansion of Indian Armed Forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, all three, acquisitions, modernization, but immediately as he took over power, and Nehru by this time was declining, and he was declining very rapidly, almost on a week-by-week basis, and all the chroniclers of that period tell you that Nehru was a pale shadow for himself, and it was getting paler by the day. In that situation, within weeks, he put his head down to restoring the army's morale. It was a defeated army, and rebuilding it, and it was because of the marvelous stuff that he did in that job that in 1965, we say that the war was a stalemate in 1965. The fact is that I would still say that India was the winning side, not only because I'm an Indian partisan, but not because of that. In that war, only one side had an objective. That side started the war. Why? Because they had an objective. They thought this time had now come for them to achieve that objective. That was Kashmir and that was Pakistan. So Pakistan started that war. They launched that war thinking that having been partners with America and Western alliances, having built their armed forces on very modern lines, having by now built a technological edge over India, technological firepower edge over India in all dimensions. And given the fact, as they presumed, Indian army was still punch drunk after 1962 and India's morale was still low, they launched that war. They had to stop that war, they had to accept ceasefire in a way humiliatingly without fulfilling any of their objectives. So when one side launches a war and has to then accept ceasefire without achieving any objective, then you can say that that side lost the war. Now, in any case, in popular imagination, we celebrate 1965 as a victory. Now remember, we might compliment Lal Bahadur Shastri, we might compliment anybody else or the generals of that at that time, Company Quartermaster Abdul Hamid, Lieutenant Colonel A.B. Tarapur, but we forget the Defence Minister of India because he is the one, he is the architect of the modern new Indian armed forces. And even today, even in 1971, when India won the war, a lot of it was the doing of YB Chavan between 1962 and 66, just 4 years, when he was Defence Minister. After that, in Mrs. Gandhi's cabinet, we know that Shastri died in January 1966 in Tashkent. In Mrs. Gandhi's cabinet, later that year, he became Home Minister, again a key position. And then, in the course of time, in 1970, in that period between 1966 and 1970, Sardar Swaran Singh was the Defence Minister, he was External Affairs earlier, he was now Defence Minister, but 1970, Mrs. Gandhi appointed Jagjivan Ram the Defence Minister. And it's amazing that in all this debate on the 50th anniversary of 1971, while even the Congress complained about Mrs. Gandhi having been excluded, and they did so sort of as an afterthought. They did not do anything proactively. They should have been celebrating Mrs. Gandhi a week earlier. They should have started it, but they didn't do any of that. At the same time, they completely forgot these two other great congressmen, that is YB Chavan and Babu Jagjivan Ram. If YB Chavan built the modern Indian armed forces, Babu Jagjivan Ram basically in 1971 redeemed that promise. So India won two wars, both under the watch of the Congress Party, 1965, 1971, but nobody remembers the two defence ministers of that period. So those two have been among the greatest defence ministers in India's political history. And it is no surprise that under them, India won those two wars. George Fernandez was again a good defence minister. So Kargil happened under him and India did quite well. In fact, Kargil was an even clearer victory, but it was in a very narrow dimension. It was a very limited war, limited in dimension, also limited in range and also geographically. So we don't count it in the same category as 1965 and 1971, which were full-fledged wars. Now these two incredible gentlemen, congressmen, who now even Congress has completely chosen to forget. And I won't be surprised if in the course of time, it is Narendra Modi, Amit Shah's BJP, which goes ahead and bends over backwards, however it works, to basically add these to their own nationalist pantheon, just as they have done with Sardar Patel, with Lal Bahadur Shastri. These are all leaders, former leaders of the Congress Party. They can do it tomorrow with Babu Jagjivan Ram, and they can do it tomorrow with YB Chavan also. Now, that's the reason I thought that today is good for us to remember these two great men who nobody remembers because they haven't even left a great political legacy or great dynasties behind them. In any case, YB Chavan did not have a child. Babu Jagjivan Ram does have Meera Kumar, who became the Speaker of National Parliament of Lok Sabha. She's also been a minister, but not quite a leader in the same kind of category. Now, YB Chavan, when the history of Indian defense is written, India fought all its three major wars in the decade of 1962 to 1971 under the watch of the Congress Party, under three different prime ministers, Jawaharlal Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri and Indira Gandhi. 1962 was lost 1965 was a stalemate but a moral victory for India because India did not have an objective and denied Pakistan fully their objective despite the costs that they suffered, the costs India inflicted on them. And 1971 was a clear-cut victory. Now, in those 10 years, when the history is written, when a fair history is written, that the role of these two sort of boring politicians, by today's standards, they'll seem boring, they'll sound boring. In fact, on TV, they will not get you any TRPs, they will not do any tutu meme, right? But they were great thinkers, great analysts of the political situation. So it's good to know a little bit about them. Now, YB Chavan. YB Chavan, we told you, he joined Mahatma Gandhi's civil disobedience in 1930, was fined for it. 1932, because he unfurled the national flag, the Indian national flag, he was sent to jail for 18 months. He did that in Satara, his hometown. I think the Maharashtrians like to call it Satara, so if I don't pronounce it right, my apologies. Again, he joined Quit India movement. Initially, he worked as an underground worker, and then he was caught and again sent to jail. 1946, he was elected to the Bombay Provincial Assembly and served as Parliamentary Secretary to Morarji Desai, who was then the Home Minister of Bombay Province. Later, Morarji Desai became Chief Minister. 1956, when Morarji Desai came to Delhi as a Central Minister, YB Chavan was made a young Chief Minister of combined Maharashtra, what used to be the combined Maharashtra and Gujarat, the Bombay Province. Later, the province split and he continued as Chief Minister of Maharashtra Province. He was the one that Nehru reached out to at a time when Nehru was in a great crisis. He was defeated. He had to fire his defense minister. He did not pick up anybody from his cabinet in Delhi. He called YB Chavan because he knew that he was young, he had energy, and he'll be able to make a difference. In fact, in Maharashtra, it was then said that Sahyadri, which is the hill mountain range in Maharashtra, that Sahyadri has been called by the Himalayas for their help. So YB Chavan came to Delhi. And what happened after that with the Indian Defence Forces, that we know very, very well. Now, YB Chavan is also a remarkable leader in India's history because he has held all the portfolios that make today's Cabinet Committee on Security. So he's been Defence Minister, Home Minister, Finance Minister, External Affairs Minister, and also briefly Deputy Prime Minister. He was briefly Deputy Prime Minister under Charan Singh, but that is the government that never even faced a vote of confidence. It fell even before that. But he was a Deputy Prime Minister. Now, it's possible that at some point after the emergency, because he had left the Congress party, he had gone somewhere else, he had joined a splinter group called Congress Earth, named after Devraj Arts, the Karnataka leader. That party did not do very well. Later in 1982, he came back to the Congress party and was merely made head of the 8th Finance Commission and died at a young age, died at 71, leaving no child. And we also know that by that time, he was a spent force in politics. And maybe that is the reason Congress chooses not to remember him. But think about it. Tomorrow, if the BJP decides to celebrate some victory day or some 60 years of victory, it will be 4 years from now, 60 years of victory in 1965, and they honor YB Chavan, where would Congress party be hiding? In fact, when this Bandra Mumbai Sea Link was built, I had immediately thought that if Congress party has any sense, they will name it after YB Chavan, but they did nothing of the sort. They named it also after Rajiv Gandhi and thereby lost an opportunity. You want to read more about what YB Chavan did? Read a book by R.D. Pradhan, former Home Secretary of India, senior civil servant. The book is titled Debacle to Revival, and you understand what was the debacle and what was the revival. That's the story I just now told you. And he also said that when Chavan just came as defense minister, he made an immediate presumption that the Chinese withdrawal after the Chinese unilaterally announced a ceasefire was purely tactical. That once the passes open up, the Chinese will come back. So he began preparing immediately for a fresh Chinese assault and then never let his guard down and never let that sense of urgency to leave him. More about Chavan you can also read in another former Union Home Secretary, Madhav Godbole, in his book Unfinished Innings, Recollections and Reflections of a Civil Servant. Now, Jagjivan Ram, on the other hand, Jagjivan Ram was somebody, unlike Chavan, who came very close to becoming India's Prime Minister in 1977 and 1979. 1977, when he had left the Congress party, Mrs. Gandhi, to basically go to Janata Party, had set up his own party called Congress for Democracy, then went to Janata Party and then felt bitter that he was denied Prime Ministership and Morarji Desai was chosen instead. Morarji made him Defence Minister, and he thought that the reason everybody had ganged up on him, as he saw it, is because he was a Dalit. Dalit is not an expression that was used very much those days, a scheduled caste or a Harijan. Now Harijan is not used anymore, at least not in public debate. Now, second time was 1979. That is when Morarji's government was falling and he thought he had an opportunity, and because he was a Dalit, he might be able to get the MPs to rally around him. But once again, he was denied. And when Charan Singh, with the help of Congress party, became Prime Minister, briefly, Jagjivan Ram also wanted to stake his claim to become Prime Minister, but the President, Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy, did not allow it, and again Jagjivan Ram thought that he was denied because he was a Dalit. Now Jagjivan Ram became Defence Minister of India in 1970. All the history that you read of 1971 war, all the accounts you hear from participants in the war, including generals, and I have had the privilege of conversing with many of them, General J.F.R. Jacob, on the record, on camera, at great detail and many conversations, many times. Lieutenant General, late Lieutenant General I.S. Gill, who was Director of Military Operations in 1971, he had quite a flaming temper and he had a very clear way of thinking, and he could speak his mind. If you think that Manik Shaw could speak his mind, so could Inder Gill. He could speak his mind. And they all talk glowingly, they've all talked glowingly about Jagjivan Ram, about the control and command he had, the freedom he could give, at the same time he could keep political authority. In fact, he's the one, and Mrs. Gandhi let him do it, he's the one who, when Pakistani army agreed to surrender in Dhaka, he's the one who came to Parliament and he said, and I quote his exact words, "I have an announcement to make. The West Pakistan forces have unconditionally surrendered in Bangladesh. Dhaka is now the free capital of a free country." So she let him do it. But today, everybody forgot him, including the Congress party. Maybe again the Congress party will say that is because he left our party and did not stay faithful. But you know, they also have to acknowledge the fact that Congress party became Congress party not just because of the Gandhi family, but also because of regional leaders, caste leaders who became national figures like these, like YB Chavan and Jagjivan Ram. You want to hear more about Jagjivan Ram? I will tell you. He was born in Ara in Bihar, very backward parts of Bihar even now, but you can imagine how it was in 1908 when he was born. He was among the first people from depressed castes who got higher education in all of Bihar at that point, among the first. Now, he came under Gandhi's influence, then he became active with All India Depressed Classes League, and later also worked in the 1934 earthquake in Bihar, and that is when he came in closer contact with Gandhi. Now, there was also an organization then called Anti-Untouchability League, which later came to be called Harijan Seva Sangh. In 1932, Anti-Untouchability League had a session presided over by Mahatma Gandhi, and there a young Jagjivan Ram spoke. He was 24 then, right? So Jagjivan Ram said, "The admonition of upper caste Hindus to us," that is to scheduled caste or to Harijans or Dalits, "the admonition of upper caste Hindus to us to quit non-vegetarian food and liquor, to live quote unquote hygienically, won't work anymore. Today, the Dalits do not want your sermons but good behavior and concrete action. Nothing else would work." This was Babu Jagjivan Ram at 24. 1936, at a rally in Patna, standing with Mahatma Gandhi again, he said, and again these are exact quotes, "On the basis of complexion, color, type of hair and body marks, it cannot be said that the race of people of particular area is pure. We belong to this country, we support Mahatma Gandhi, we want equality." And then he said, look, caste is a challenge in India and it has to be fought. He also has some kind of a world record because he remained a legislator continuously for 50 years, between 1936 and 1986, uninterrupted. Now, there are also some interesting asides to him when he was defense minister. For example, if you read a book by Stephen Wilkinson, who is a Yale professor, called Army and Nation, basically, how did India's army and democracy evolve together and why India did not go the way that Pakistan went. It's a marvelous book. In that book, he recounts an incident based on his conversations with late Lieutenant General S.K. Sinha. Now, General S.K. Sinha was a brigadier under Manik Shaw and appointed Deputy Adjutant General. Now, Deputy Adjutant General branch or AG branch is something like the HR headquarters or the HR node of the army. Now, he was there, and one day he said that Manik Shaw was quite exercised, and Manik Shaw said to him, Defense Minister has gone mad. He is now checking what is the caste composition of officers in IMA because he's just got a list. And he explained to Wilkinson that Jagjivan Ram sought a list of the latest pass outs from Indian Military Academy. And he asked General Sinha, what percentage of these are scheduled castes? And he said, I told him that it's only about 1%. And he said, it's nonsensical. Haven't we? Doesn't the Constitution say that we have to have 15% reservation for scheduled castes and 7.5% for tribal scheduled tribes? Why is that not happening? And he said Manik Shaw got really exercised, and he told General Sinha, quote unquote, he said, "Bhai, you are from Bihar, you know these caste things and politics, you deal with him." So General Sinha said that he actually went to Jagjivan Ram with a reply and said, look, I've studied the records of the discussions leading to the reservation law, and those records clearly state that armed forces were to be kept out of this. He also said that since independence, India has added a lot more people of lower caste, scheduled castes, backward castes at other ranks, not necessarily in officer ranks, and that was also changing now. And he said, once I gave all this data and facts to Jagjivan Ram, he calmed down and he did not push it any further. In any case, which smart political leader at that point would take pangas with? Sam Manik Shaw, who was a victorious general. Now, Jagjivan Ram was also given to plain speaking. So I had the pleasure of once going to meet him and for a long conversation, because politicians, when they are out of power, they have a lot of time for you. So early 1985, I was doing a detailed story for India Today magazine when the first rash of violence over OBC reservations had broken out, mostly in Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh. Mandal Commission issue was there, but these states also had their own local commissions which had also come up with OBC reservation. So there were riots in both the states, and I was doing a fairly exhaustive story on this along with my colleague Ramesh Menon, who was our correspondent in Ahmedabad. So I also traveled to Gujarat, to Madhya Pradesh, and now in Delhi I was talking to various people who might know more about reservations, so I went to meet Babu Jagjivan Ram. So Babu Jagjivan Ram explained the rationale of reservation, and I can do no better then cite from that article from as he was quoted in that article. You will also see that text highlighted on my screen from that article. So he said, explaining the rationale for reservations, and it's an article in the April 15, 1985 issue of India Today magazine. And he's using direct language. Today I will be shy of using this language. He said, quote, a shoemaker may make thrice the amount of money a clerk does, yet does he have the prestige? But if a chamar's son becomes a sub-inspector, then the Brahmin constable will salute him. That's why you need reservations. He's explaining that. Imagine what kind of a revolution it is when a Bhangi's son becomes district magistrate. And he says that unless you make provision to accommodate these aspirations of castes and social groups which have been left out, there will be caste wars in this country. And remember, he said this in April of 1985. How prescient could it be? So I thought, since everybody is talking 1971, everybody is talking politics of that era, let's not confine ourselves to the Gandhi family, to Nehru, to Krishna Menon. Let's also look at some other marvelous characters, political characters of that period, without whom definitely India would not have been able to get the outcome that India got in 1965 and 1971. Remember, that's all within the same decade, which started with a debacle against China. So this is truly a story from debacle to revival, that is 65, to victory, that is 71. And these two gentlemen, completely forgotten now, played a key role. So I thought, in fairness to them and fairness to all of us, we should talk about them a little bit today.